We're joined this morning by the former advisor to Boris Johnson and now Conservative Life peer in the House of Lords, Lord Daniel Moylan, and he's joined by the broadcaster and regular to this programme, Liz Kershaw, who I must say was the one chortling away to that. Daniel, can we start with you? Not call it a chortle.
Oh, sorry, miss.
No, I just want to explain where it came from.
She's like a
Enjoyed the heckling.
What did you do about... I accidentally phoned you yesterday. I didn't mean to phone you.
Did you?
That finger.
Yeah, my phone was trying to do something. The next minute, it's ringing Stephen Dixon. Now, that's all right, because you wouldn't be bothered.
No.
But it can be really embarrassing. I don't know. And I tried to work out how it had happened.
Oh, finger trouble.
Yeah.
Finger trouble. Let's talk cost of living, Daniel, should we, in the Express to kick off with, because whatever else is going on with pressures on the Prime Minister, if he wants to get back to business, as he says he does, cost of living has got to be top of the agenda, hasn't it?
You're absolutely right, and that's why I was drawing attention to this story, which is in today's Express, which is, Rishi, I'm confident we have the tools to bring down inflation. But the trouble is, and this is where the government has a real problem, if you read the story, there's actually almost nothing to it. I mean, he rightly says that you've got three tools you've got to use: fiscal policy, which is what the government spends in taxes, independent monetary policy, I'll come back to that, and then supply-side reform. The government isn't doing any of those the right way round. Let's start with the independent monetary policy. Gordon Brown gave the management of our money supply to the Bank of England to be run independently. We now have a governor of the Bank of England that appears in front of a Commons Select Committee and says, we're facing an apocalypse on inflation and I'm totally helpless. Exactly the reverse of what you'd expect to hear from a governor of the Bank of England. The blunt truth is that in order to address inflation, interest rates are going to have to rise. If that's what he means by saying strong independent monetary policy, A, if it's independent, what's he got to say about it?
Yeah.
And B, is he actually talking about interest rate rises? Because unless we actually see those, to be honest, we're going to have to live with very high inflation. That's because we've printed so much money over the last few years. As far as the fiscal policy is concerned, however, he's been putting taxes up, whereas what we probably need is lower taxes on the fiscal policy side. So we're all the wrong way round. And he's right to talk about what he calls supply-side reform, which is basically, what that means is making it easier for businesses to do business and be entrepreneurial. But we haven't seen very much of it so far. We've seen a lot of government-led type economic activity, but taking the shackles off business and making them compete, we've seen which is tough, because businesses love it when the government comes along and says, oh, we're going to help you do this. But actually making them compete is something businesses don't really like. So there's an awful lot to do here, and there's no sign in this article that the Chancellor has really grasped what needs to be done, even though he's identified the right policy, the right instrument.
There's all this talk of a reshuffle, perhaps, to sort of consolidate cabinet. Do you think Mr Sunak's time might be over?
No, I have no idea about that. I've no idea if there'll be a reshuffle or what's going to happen in it. And I'm sure Rishi Sunak could be a great Chancellor, but he's got to get to grips, honestly, with the groupthink inside the Treasury. All they think about is the debt, when there's so much else we've got to think about in the economy and about stimulating growth. And he's got to learn the lessons from the past about how we do this, be honest about them and drive them through.
Well, all of this, Liz, ties into, I suppose, exactly what you want to cover inside the Mail, the fight back of the Tories, because what the Chancellor, with obviously the sign-off from the Prime Minister, decide to do on the cost of living crisis will be part of the record that Boris will be judged on.
Yeah, I mean, on the cost of living crisis, which is most people's main preoccupation, not interested in cake. I mean, immediately as the results came out last night about the Boris confidence vote, Lammy came on and started banging on about cake again. I just had to go to bed. I was wound up. I didn't sleep in the bed. I thought, please, on the cost of living crisis, which Daniel was talking about, the government's economic policy, everything that I was taught, I did economics at school, I did economics at university, everything I was taught was just thrown out of the window. In order to reduce inflation, you take the money out of people's pockets so they can't go out and spend, you suppress demand, prices don't keep going up, demand and supply, price elasticity. It's not about that now, it's external forces like oil prices, food prices. We've got the Ukraine, the wheat basket of Europe, 74 tankers stuck in Odessa, can't get out because of Russian landmines and submarines. This year's crop will rot. that's going to push prices up. We're still overseas. People are actually going to starve to death. So it's nothing to do with the old style, put a penny on income tax or increase your mortgage payments every month and you'll stop going out buying sofas. It's bigger than that now. And I've not really heard any great ideas on that. So they've got to get to grips with that. They've got to get to grips with the price of oil, I mentioned this earlier, and petrol and gas and diesel, so you can run your van and go out to work.
Green levy, are we talking?
Oh, I'm coming on to that, Stephen. But I'm talking about the tax, the fuel duty, which they've slashed in other countries like Holland and France. And on top, it's compounding. It's a compound tax because the Chancellor, and he can't keep this going and stay fashionable, is actually putting VAT on fuel duty. So 88p out of every litre of petrol now is going straight to the treasury. So stop patronising people by saying, we're going to give you £150 to help you through the winter when you've got a £2,800 fuel bill. Take it off at the pump. So where I filled up the other day, for instance, to be able to come here, it was £103. So let's have it be £52, get people out, get people working, being productive. These are the sort of conservative policies that people want to see.
And thanks, Daniel.
Well, I think I'm not as critical of the government for the emergency package they put in place to deal with the cost of living crisis, which I think, but it's a sticking plaster and an emergency package. They have to move on from, and it's welcome, but they have to move on from that to get the fundamental policies right that will address the inflationary crisis that we're facing. You know, it's very easy to think about inflation as rising prices, but you could also think about it as a fall in the value of money. And the only custodian of the value of money is the Bank of England. And they're not doing the right thing. The pound is going down. That makes imports even cheaper, even more expensive, and puts prices up. If they raised interest rates, the pound would rise, as other countries already are. The pound would rise, and it would actually help with inflation, and it would throttle a degree of demand, which I think is what we've got to do. And money has to be made. The value of money has to be restored, because that's what's actually happening. We've printed so much of it. Its value has gone down.
Don't you think we've already crushed demand? I mean, just personally, I think about going out, nipping into Milton Keynes.
We have to some extent, but you see, you're going to have... Inflation is going to continue if you have all this money washing about and you're not removing it to some extent from the system. Well, that's really what needs to be done.
What about the people who haven't got money washing about and have cut out every single luxury in life that you can think of?
Well, that's why I think you've got to use... This is where the fiscal policy comes in, what the government spends and what it takes. You need to stop worrying so much about the debt, which they're all obsessed about, and you need to think, how can we use fiscal policy in a targeted way, better targeted than the emergency package?
Which we're coming on to, yeah.
But in a targeted way to help people who are suffering, while we get inflation out of the system through the only route we know that works, which is the use of monetary policy. And at the same time, taking the shackles off entrepreneurialism, or, I'll put it another way, forcing businesses to be more entrepreneurial and compete.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that emergency package that announced a couple of weeks ago by Rishi Sunak, but was one of the reasons quoted yesterday by Jesse Norris that there was some dissatisfaction within the party, Jesse Norman, with the Prime Minister, that it wasn't a Conservative policy just to be handing out cash in sort of, willy-nilly to everybody. You want to talk about this article in the Daily Mail, page 18, second homeowners getting double energy rebate, and these are the sorts of things that need fixing.
Well, when this was announced, first of all, you're going to get rebates on your council tax, and then you're all going to get a fuel rebate, and you're going to get this and that, and it's not going to be means tested. So immediately people are saying, oh, hang on, the very richest in our country are going to get the same as the very poorest. Can that be right? And I came on this programme and told you how every winter my dad and his wife used to get the winter fuel allowance and go out and stock up on champagne. you know, was that rightly targeted? But I was thinking, wait a minute, because I own multiple houses, which I let out to young people who can't afford a deposit or the market rent, but I pay the bills. I'm not saying this to blow my own trumpet. It just occurred to me that I'd be getting like 5 council tax rebates and I'd be getting 5 fuel rebates. And I thought, is that right? Is that what's going to happen? And it's confirmed in this article that it is. And Daniel and I were discussing this, and he's got more of an inside track on how the treasury, etc., works. And the fact is, he can confirm it, that they just have no idea how to distribute this because they don't have the data on who owns what and who pays what.
I mean, would there be that many people in that position?
There will be. But, I mean, it's even if you just have a holiday home, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's just the same thing to me, similar as during the lockdowns. And we've now got billions of pounds of fraudulently claimed money by businesses and so the self-employed, which the Treasury's kind of shrugged off and said, well, we can't get it back, we're not going to bother. There's just so much money being pumped into the economy and printed that it's just really sloppy.
Well, you raised some interesting points. Love to know what you think. GBviews at gbnews.uk. We are out of time, I'm afraid to say.
Can we talk about the fat jab that I know you'd chosen to talk about in the next paper review? Yeah, save that one. We didn't have time to get to it, but it's in The Sun, and I really want to hear about that.
Because you're so fat, isn't it?
Well, I just think it's interesting handing out jabs to stop people being hungry. Let's talk about that in the next hour.